Hello everyone and welcome to part 4 of a Django and GraphQL volleyball app. In this video, we'll be finally adding GraphQL support to our Django project. I've prepared some to-do list. So what we're going to do is first we'll install all these libraries. They'll basically adding GraphQL through Graphene, and then we'll also add a tool that makes it much easier to work with GraphQL in Django. And finally, we'll add some extras which make some GraphQL and Django operations easier, like pagination, for example. But we'll get there. So I think we can start with installing these three. So first of all, we'll install Graphene, which is like a core to GraphQL in Python. I think we'll start with installing the 2.1 version. So let's add that to our requirements file. I think we just need to add Graphene for now. Then we'll add versions once we know what they are. The next one will be Graphene Django. Let's quickly see what we need to do. Pip install Graphene Django. Let's do it. And finally, the last one, Graphene Django extras. And I think the next thing we need to do is to actually build it. So we have to do docker compose build, and that will install our requirement. It might take a while, so while doing it we can start exploring the libraries. So first of them is Graphene. As I mentioned, it's actually the core of everything we do in Django and in GraphQL in general. The easiest way to see is actually go to docs and look around, play around with it. Yeah, we're just installing the 2.1, I guess. Yeah, and it allows us to create queries, mutations. I think it's somewhere in docs. Queries, mutations, subscriptions. I think it has a bunch of types, scalars. So like enums we can have, then some other types, mostly like commonly used. So base one are strings, integers, floats, booleans, IDs. You also have dates, date times, JSON even. And you can easily create your own custom types. The next one we can check is another one, which is a list. This is for like if you want to have a list of types of objects, then use list type. Object type is like it's a core of everything. It's like the base class you always use. Interfaces, unions. I suggest you to read GraphQL docs. GraphQL docs. I won't be explaining all of them, so I think the best is to just go there and have a look. And they explain everything basically, like interfaces, for example. You can see what they are, how they work, and what do you need to do to actually make them work. But I think we won't be using it, so yeah, the execution relay, we won't be using it, so I'm skipping it. They also give some middleware and data loaders for batches. The next one is Django, Graphene Django. It's basically just adding some stuff we can add to our Django project and work with models directly. So it's more or less like a Django when you define your schemas, but we'll get there. probably in the next video. So in here they basically just tell you what to do. Plus you have some more examples like filtering, so you can use filters library, Django filters library, and what else? You can use authorization, like it's probably like user context or context user somewhere. You can use that, but there's also another library I'll probably add, but not in this video. You can have a debug middleware, which I think we will use in this video to make sure everything is set up correctly. And you can also use Django Forms and Race framework to have to build your mutations, and yeah, so you basically just create a form and integrate it with your GraphQL easily. And then the last one I wanted to introduce is Graphene Django Extras. I usually use it to have a pagination because it's not so easy with Graphene and Graphene Django. This one is pretty easy to use. We'll use it soon, but it's good to have it now so we won't forget. But okay, so we have our app up to date, I guess, and probably what we need to do now is I think I have to restart my PyCharm so it can update the cache, invalidate the cache, and yep, let's invalidate and restart. It should take a minute. Okay, I'm back. It restarted and now indexing almost done. So let's first see what versions we have installed so we can pin them in here. To do this we can do docker compose run --rm, and then I think it was app, I never remember. Yep, that was app. Docker compose run app, and then we want to run bash, do pip freeze basically. Okay, so we need a Graphene version 1.2.1.3, so let's make it less than 2.2, then Graphene Django less than 2.3, and extras, let's pin it because it looks like it's not even v1, so let's, okay. Now let's go back to our code and see how we can actually get started with it. With this it's pretty simple. It's just you install it and then you have to define your main schema, and that would accept queries, mutation and subscriptions. But let's first configure it with Django, because as you can see there is nothing else to do for us. So let's jump in here and let's see what they suggest. Usually this is how you work. You go to docs and you see how you actually set it up with your project or a framework, and just follow the steps. So we'll do the same. So we already have this. Everything is done up this point. We already have our models. We don't need that one. Let's scroll down. They say that we should create some object types already, schemas for our models, but I think we don't have to do it now. What I would do instead is we could make a query, our base query, which then will do nothing, so it won't have any queries on it. We won't be able to actually query anything for now, but we'll make sure everything is set up. So let's see, let's add Graphene Django to our installed apps. I think it's in settings, installed apps. Okay, let's do it's third party. So we can put it in here like this, I think. Then we need a graphene schema. Okay, I'll tell you what that does in a second. Let's just make it here. Okay, so this is a special setting required by Graphene Django, and this will tell to Graphene Django that this file in here is a main file. It's like a main entry point to our GraphQL app. So we need to create this in our project. So I think I will do it in apps, or maybe it's not apps actually. Let's call it outside then. So we can do Python package and call it GraphQL. I think that won't collide with any other library, I hope. And now so I think we can do GraphQL. Then we need a schema file. And then we need a schema variable like that. So let's create a schema file in here. Schema. And let's see what we need else. And they suggest to add this to URLs, but I think we'll add that one. Nope, not that one. This one. This will reuse the schema we defined. So let's just copy paste that to our URLs. And I think we can use path instead. And now we can import this GraphQL. Yes. And as you can see here, this is that tells our GraphQL implementation that it should expose a special UI interface to our browser, so we can easily browse our GraphQL implementation. I'll show in a minute how it works. Maybe let's quit from here. And okay, so we've got our schema file empty, which we need to fill with some configuration. We already have Graphene configured. We added that to GraphQL. I'm not even sure if we need this, but we'll see. Yep. So next thing is we actually need a schema for our project. So let's go and copy paste this. I think we don't need this. And as you know, we don't need this for now. So what it does is it's just nothing at the moment, but this is the minimum setup to have our GraphQL running in Django app. We just tell it to create a query, like a main query, the root query, and later we'll start attaching some proper queries to this with proper schemas and everything. So don't worry about that now. And we just need to pass the query to the main schema definition. Okay, let's make it one more. Okay, so now I think we can do Docker Compose app to make sure everything is fine. Let's see. Okay, so it's running our database and hopefully localhost, and I think it's 8000/GraphQL, and it's not working. What about this? Okay, so this is not working as well. So let's debug why. It's probably something bad in the configuration. Let's see. Docker compose. Let's run. Let's go into bash and see what's wrong. Manage py check. Yeah. Cannot import name resolve info. I think I know why, so I will leave it as it is for now and actually go to the debug. Let's see if they have it in here. If not, maybe because it cannot be empty. That's my bad guess. So let's see. We'll go to Django debug middleware. That will allow us to actually have one query, which is debug. So this is very helpful because it allows you to debug how many queries you've made or some other stuff. Hopefully soon it will work and I'll show you. Okay, debug. Let's add it to our graphene object type to the query. Field Django debug, and yeah, we need to install it, import it. Sorry, like that. Let's see if it works now. Still doesn't work. Probably I'm still missing something. Okay, I'm back, and silly me, of course. I had it in the back of my head, and I even said that probably it won't hurt if I name it GraphQL, but actually it did, and that's the issue, because I called it GraphQL and probably it's using something GraphQL named in the backend somewhere, I guess. So I think we need to just rename it to something else than GraphQL. So maybe we can call it GraphQL API. That should be fine. And let's do this in here as well. API. Also, one thing that I forgot, if you go to the debug, Django debug middleware, we need to add this middleware to Graphene configuration. So let's do this in here, add a comma, and try now, check. Yep, everything is fine now. So let's quit and let's up the project and see if that's fine now. Okay, no page is found. Let's go to GraphQL. Okay, it's fine now. So this is the GraphiQL. This is a UI interface that you can use to test your GraphQL implementation. At the moment, we don't have any queries. It's just the debug, and it gives you the SQL information, but it's not useful for now. But if you want to, let's actually see how it works. So what you do is you run your queries or mutations in here, and then you add this debug, dunder debug, and then you define which fields from SQL you want to display. But the other way to actually know and choose is doing this in here. So what we can do in here is, as you can see, it also hints what can be used. So I think we can just do this debug, and if you type control space, it will fill if there is only one field available, it will just put it there. If not, if there are more, it will just display all the options. So for example, for SQL, as you can see now, we have few of them to choose from. So let's use SQL and maybe raw SQL. Maybe it's slow. Don't know how it works, but what else can we use? Maybe duration. And then if you run your query, it will pop out here. But as I mentioned, there is nothing to nothing to be displayed. So yeah, you won't see anything in here. And in the next video, we'll actually start adding the interface for our models, and we will use this more heavily as well, especially for lists. Maybe let's actually put this in here now, so we won't forget. Okay, let's put it in settings below the graphene configuration. So what it does is it tells graphene Django to use this pagination, is limit offset pagination, and I think if we can find it in here. Yeah, when you use it, you can define your own params if you want, but if not, then it will use the default ones that we defined in our settings. It's yeah, and the example, I think we can just probably it will look like this. So limit and offset you can define. This is how you make pagination. The other one is actually using the page, so it's a page GraphQL pagination, but I usually prefer limit offset. Default page size is 20, max page size 50. So even if you put like 70, you'd like to display 70 on your page, or someone wanted to be sneaky and DDoS or something, it won't allow them to do that. So it will limit them to 50 max. And cache active, I think for now I will just not include it in here. Okay, let's save it. Everything is working as it should. Let's just double check. Yes, everything's fine. And for example, if you put the field that doesn't exist, it will just error that field cannot be queried. We'll have a closer look at this once we have something to query. So for now, I think that's it. We successfully managed to implement GraphQL into our project, plus some useful libraries. We had some issue with naming, but it's solved now. So stay tuned. In the next video, we'll finally add our first query, or probably like few of them, and maybe discuss about schemas and how to do it with Django, if you have to or not. So thank you for watching, and see you next time.